everyone, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, I'm Kirsten Amanda and I'm a watercolor artist from Canada. So today I thought it would be fun to share with you guys how to make the perfect floral composition. This video is super beginner friendly and easy. For me, when I started out painting, making floral compositions was one of the harder things for me to learn. Drawing flowers is one thing, but trying to arrange them in a way that's pleasant to the eye is something that takes a while to learn. But I found kind of a hack that you can easily do this by drawing your flowers on different layers in Procreate and then arranging them in a way that looks nice. And alternatively, if you don't have a drawing pad or Procreate, you can print off the pictures of the flowers and also arrange them that way. I just find that this is a lot easier than drawing out your composition and then you realize that the flower isn't in the right spot or something looks a little bit off. And at that point, you have no choice but to erase everything you've just drawn and shift it up a little bit, which can be really frustrating and time consuming. So I find this to be a much easier way to kind of get the practice in on knowing what looks good where and how to arrange the florals in a way that's pleasant on the eye. And then once you've done that a bunch of times, you'll feel a lot more confident with freehand sketching and just, with the blank piece of paper, starting your composition from there. So with that said, I will be taking you through step by step how you can make the perfect floral composition and all of my tips and tricks along the way. So without further ado, let's get into the video. When choosing which flowers you'd like to paint, the amount is up to you. In this video, I'm going to be choosing 2 primary flowers and 1 secondary flower. My primary flowers will be pansies and cosmos, as I find these 2 flowers stand alone very nicely. A secondary flower in terms of floral composition is kind of your filler flower, so to speak. So this can be something that doesn't stand alone as well, such as blooms and buds, or flowers like lavender or sweet peas. If you have your own reference photo of your flowers from your garden or a visit to nature, that's amazing, but where I live, it's cold most of the year, so I don't have access to photos like this year-round. As a way to work around this, you can use a royalty-free picture website which gives you permission to use the photos of the flowers as a reference. Make sure you either use a royalty-free site or that you are asking permission from the person who took the photo before you use it as a reference for your art. So there are 3 royalty-free sites that I wanted to share with you that I really like for finding reference photos for flowers. The first is Unsplash, and I'm using this site to save photos of pansies and cosmos because I found lots of great pictures on here. Keep in mind when looking for pictures of flowers that you want them to be diverse. Some facing forward, some facing to the side, or facing downward. This will help to make your floral composition look more natural. I couldn't find as many pictures of sweet peas, so I went onto another royalty-free site called Pixabay and found a few there, but I wanted a couple more, so I went over to iStock and grabbed some more. I saved all my photos to an album for easy access. So if you do not have an iPad or a drawing pad, this is where you'd want to print off your pictures and cut around the florals. If you do have an iPad, we are going to open a new template and add our pictures in one by one. So the easiest and most beginner-friendly way to get your reference photos into drawings is to trace over the picture in Procreate. I do this by adding the photo in, turning down the opacity, and then adding another layer on top to draw on. For me personally, I like to use the picture of the flower as more of a placeholder or reference for my drawing, but for the sake of this video, I will be tracing over it almost perfectly with a couple minor changes as I go. So as you can see, I'm just drawing the basics and not all of the details. We can paint in the details with our paint later on. Once you finish one flower, you will move on to the next by importing the next photo and making sure you add a new layer for the next drawing so that all of your flowers are on different layers. I'm choosing to draw 3 flowers of each primary flower as I like to stick to the rule of odds. If you've never heard of the rule of odds, this means that when you're including a group of subjects in your composition, an odd number rather than an even one will produce a more interesting and more visually pleasing composition. Once you have all your flowers on different layers, it will look something like this. As you can see, I can now select one layer with one flower and move it around and resize it easily. Now that we have all of our primary flowers on different layers, we can start playing around with arranging them. There are many different ways to arrange a composition, and I won't be going through all of them in this video, but rather showing you one of my favorites. I like to use the S-curve technique. If you need, you can draw a loose S across your canvas on a different layer so that you have something to follow. As you can see, in some of my other floral paintings, I have used this technique and it is really pleasant on the eye. So I'm just going to start by placing a cosmo flower at the bottom of the S and then working in the other flowers above. I sometimes like to place two of the same flowers next to each other, and other times break them up as it adds some interest. As you can see, I have a cosmo and then a pansy above and then another cosmo. Then I've added two pansies side by side, and lastly another cosmo on top. I also like to overlap my flowers so that there aren't any random floating flowers on the page. Once you have your flowers in the spots you're happy with, you can combine all the layers and then start erasing the overlap. I made my cosmos the focal point of the composition, so all of them are in front and the pansies are tucked behind. You'll want to keep in mind which flowers are in the forefront and which are in the back before you erase, so you know which lines need to go and which need to stay. After you have the primary flowers arranged and the extra lines removed, it's time to start adding the secondary flowers. This is a very intuitive process, but I like to look for spots that have a gap. As you can see, I'm adding the sweet pea reference photo in and using that as a guide for where I want my secondary flowers to sit. I'm not tracing this one exactly, it's more the shape that I'm after, and then I'm adding sweet peas in spots that I think flatter this composition. Again, this takes a lot of practice, but once you keep doing it over and over again, it becomes second nature. You can add more reference photos in to use as a guide for other secondary flowers throughout your composition, or if you feel comfortable, you can freehand draw them as I am doing here. Once you have a few placed down, we're ready to move on to the next step. The last step to your composition is adding in the foliage. This is the most enjoyable part for me, and I get to use my eye to determine where I think some leaves or vines might look nice. If you're not comfortable freehanding this, you can easily find royalty-free photos of leaves and greenery to add into your composition in the same way we did the flowers and trace over them. One thing to keep in mind when drawing in your foliage is to make sure you have movement happening. In nature, leaves turn and stems and vines curve, so we want to make sure we are bringing that into our composition. Straight lines are something that I don't often include in my paintings unless a particular type of greenery has that quality. When choosing your foliage, you can also keep in mind what types of leaves are attached to the particular flowers you have chosen. As you can see, I have added in some leaves that look very similar to the leaves on a cosmo, and then I have also added in all of the turning vines that sweet peas naturally have. So again, I'm just filling in any gaps that draw my attention with some varying greenery. Remember, the more movement, the better. Now that you have a composition that you are happy with, the next step is to get this down onto our paper. In this video, I will be printing off my composition and tracing it onto watercolor paper using a light pad. There are many other ways to get your composition onto paper, such as tracing over a window, or alternatively placing the drawing on top of your paper and tracing it with a lot of pressure with a pencil, imprinting the paper below. It's up to you how you'd like to get your composition onto paper, but any of the techniques work just fine. Once you have your composition sketched out onto the paper, the composition is done and you are ready for the fun part, which is painting. Alright you guys, that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something, and also that you feel a lot more confident creating your own floral compositions. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. You know it means the world to me to know that the content I'm putting out there is providing value to you. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!